Email as a communications protocol or method is universally accepted by all, but it is so flawed that trying to fix it with encryption isn't going to solve the problem. In this video, we're going to talk about why trying to address the email dilemma with encryption is like patching a leaky roof with blobs of plaster. You're not solving the problem. We are forced to use email, and to date there's no universal method of communication that everyone is guaranteed to have other than email. So we'll be smart. We need to accept the flaws of email and use it properly and solve its more serious threats. Stay right there. I'm on the platform Odyssey.com, and I'm now one of the top creators on there. In case I get the platform, please follow me there using the link in the description. My company provides privacy solutions like a Bytes VPN, Brax Mail, and now our newest product is the Brax 2 privacy phone, which protects your data on mobile. Brax 2 is now available on Amazon and is also on my app, Brax Me. The links are in the description. What exactly is the problem with email? Well, there are many. First of all, the protocol itself is flawed, and although some attempts are being made to patch it up, it is by no means fixed. The first issue with the protocol is that the original standard required plain text transfer, in other words, the email standard, which is called SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, functions primarily by sending your mails in plain text. Some of the larger companies like Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft are trying to solve this a little bit by allowing a data transfer to occur with an upgraded connection. This upgraded connection is called Start TLS. So first, a plain text connection is established between two mail servers, and then to upgrade the connection, the sending server is supposed to send the command Start TLS. If this command is not sent, then the connection is not upgraded to an encrypted connection. First of all, Start TLS is by no means required. The majority of mail servers are still connecting without Start TLS. Secondly, it is a trivial matter for an entity to strip out Start TLS in the network traffic so that the receiving server never gets it. Thus, the connection will never go through encryption. This is a threat from third parties since communications between two email servers can be read or sniffed by a listening party and the email stored elsewhere. This is a typical government way of reading email, so it is safe to assume that a copy of your email traffic is in the hands of a three-letter agency. If the connection ends up encrypted, the three-letter agency will get the email anyway from the platform because of what I've constantly referred to as the public-private partnership in the surveillance state. The point is you have to assume that someone has a copy of your email, and not just the sending and receiving platforms, who of course also has a copy of the emails. The free email platforms like Google, Gmail, Yahoo, and Microsoft Outlook make their money by reading your emails and using that to profile your activities. Presumably for advertising purposes, but really for any purpose as long as the one that needs your data is paying for it. So aside from the threat of your email being read in transit, it should be obvious that these free email platforms are reading your email while it is stored on their servers, and of course sharing it to the government for a price. To summarize what I just said, your email can be captured by third parties, like the state, and by the platforms providing free email services, and feeble attempts at some encryption can be made to fail. And there are many more things in your email than you think. It's not just the actual message itself. In fact, there's a lot of value to be gotten from email just from information gathered from the section of the email called the header. One of the things that the header contains is the sender and all the recipients. It will often have not just the email address, but also the real name of the parties. It doesn't take a genius to figure this part out. Your email provider has a contact list of all the parties you've exchanged email with, both incoming and outgoing. So these entities can clearly construct what I call a relationship map. This means they can make a chart of who knows who and make intersecting circles of relationships that can be identified as work, family, politics, religious, online stores, purchases, spam, and so on. These same entities like Google already have uploaded contact lists from social media. So then it will be possible to connect your email to even more data such as your address, real name, and phone number, not counting your social media activities. The other part of the header data is the subject line. The subject line can reveal a lot in itself. In fact, the subject line is often used to find spam. The final major part of the header is that it shows a trace of the email as it went from the original sender's machine all the way to the receiving SMTP server. What's bad about this is that all emails show the IP address of the sender, and this is something I've explained in many videos. This IP address is typically enough to find your home location, typically within 200 feet. In other words, it won't be too much of a guess to find out which house you're living in. The technique used to find your actual location from an IP address is by using a reverse IP lookup database, something that you can easily get from companies like Skyhook Wireless or Here.com and many others. If I were an intelligence officer of some state, it wouldn't take much to get a good picture of your activities by looking at the header alone. I can find out where you live, I can see who you associate with, and that will likely tell me where you work. The subject line of the emails may also tell me what work you do. I could likely find out your religious beliefs, political beliefs, purchasing habits, social media habits, just from the header alone. Now keep this header problem in the back of your head and we will reassemble this information later on into a coherent argument. Let's get back to the message body now since everyone thinks this is the most important. So the general idea with encryption of emails is that it is possible to encrypt the email message body. Many techniques are available to do this. I have a video on GPG where you can manually encrypt emails yourself and decrypt emails that you receive as well. GPG is a very strong encryption method, and if used correctly, it should be impossible to read the encrypted body of the message without some quantum computer, and even that cannot necessarily succeed. Edward Snowden used GPG to communicate with the press before he fled the US. So obviously he thinks it is secure enough. We discussed the header earlier, but we will not belabor that for the moment. If someone intercepted the message between Edward Snowden and Glenn Greenwald of The Guardian, they could have, in theory, anticipated some issue. However, Edward Snowden wasn't dumb. He didn't use his normal email to do this communication with Glenn Greenwald. Instead, he contacted him anonymously. He made a new email account that was used only for this purpose. So in this case, the header data was basically neutered. Header data is of value only if it contains identifiers like the sender and the receiver, IP addresses, and things that can be matched to contact lists. It shouldn't be a mystery to Snowden that email is being read by the US government. In fact, he states that rather frequently. But this particular way he used it worked, and because it did work, everyone thinks the answer is to follow Snowden's method and we would have safe email. The problem is that it worked in a one-time isolated use. A new email from an email client that did not emit an IP address and no prior identity to be associated with the new email address. So yes, in this particular use, the GPG encryption worked well and is a good solution. The problem is that this cannot be applied to real-life use where we stick to the same email. Some of you sticking to it for 25 years. Let's say you did use your regular email account with GPG to communicate with some regular contact. Again, it would not take a genius intelligence operative to identify the sender and receiver. Look at the history of email traffic between the two. Look at the history of email of each one individually and see what the intersection is that causes the two parties to want to talk in GPG. Using GPG in this case is like a honeypot. If I were the three-letter agency, I would immediately sequester all emails flowing through the internet with GPG and see if these people are hiding something. If the header identifier shows some regular traffic over time, then these communications will be isolated and targeted for analysis. Let's now say that instead of using GPG, you decide to use some encrypted email service. Some of these are popular companies like Proton Mail and Tutanota. Now, these platforms can be of some use. I'm not ruling that out. Just as Snowden found that he can make an anonymous account and communicate with encryption, in a modern context, we could also have Glenn Greenwald have a published account on a Proton Mail, and then in theory, he could initiate a conversation there using a new anonymous account. Here it is useful for Glenn Greenwald to have a published Proton Mail account, since people will know that it is possible to reach him with encrypted communications and not having to do anything with GPG. Platforms like Proton Mail handle the encryption automatically, but nothing changes here for a Snowden. He still has to establish a brand new account and used only for one single purpose, or the account will be profiled. And it would be assumed that someone like a Glenn Greenwald would have monitored email. It's only reasonable to expect that, since he made his living by talking to whistleblowers. Here you see one of the problems. It is not reasonable to expect that you will have safe communications via email if you use it for multiple purposes and for multiple contacts. If a Snowden had a long-term Proton Mail account and then used this same account to contact Greenwald, then it is safe to assume that the feds in their SUVs would have gotten to Snowden. Let me isolate another problem for those who think they will move all their email activity to encrypted email platforms like Proton Mail. And this would apply to a Greenwald as well. Unfortunately, if you use one general email address, all your contacts in life will be sending you messages to that one email address. If Greenwald and Snowden did this, their Proton Mail account would have messages of travel plans, personal talk, friends parties, social media, online purchases, political meetings, political debates, spam, sports activities, concerts, church activities, communications with government agencies, and on and on. And of course, you would expect that unsolicited email would be mostly unencrypted. So let's refine our thoughts here. You use Proton Mail, but likely 99.9% of your general emails will be unencrypted. 100% of headers that have gone through an external email server, and of course, that data captured. A Proton Mail itself will know quite a bit about you just based on your unencrypted email, and Proton Mail is already a potential honeypot since the people in the platform are there because they have something to hide. So what happened was, instead of achieving stealth, you're blaring to the public that your email is with a well-known encrypted platform like Proton Mail, and that your data can be subpoenaed, as has been done already historically. The question you have to ask yourself is, what benefit have you achieved with a long-term encrypted email account? If you think about this deeply, you will realize that you did not help yourself with this kind of move. If you understood that email is unsafe and you believe it is unsafe, and that someone can always read it, you will behave quite differently. You will not be bothered by nonsense spam emails to you because you have no interaction with this. You will be bothered by more intense communications over email of a more personal nature. For example, you wouldn't want someone reading emails between family members or between people in a relationship. If you understood the risk, chances are you will not put these kinds of messages in emails. You will likely not be bothered by work-related messages on email, since that's obvious stuff, and a copy of traffic will exist often among multiple coworkers and clients. But you will also be smart enough to know not to put things in email messages that may come to haunt you in the future. I was in a lawsuit where, during the deposition, the opposing party laid out 20 years of office email in a big giant book and tried to parse every word I ever said in that period of time. But I always knew email was being read. In fact, our IT department could read the corporate emails. So for that reason, I did not put certain topics in emails, and that was discussed in person. If you understood that email is unsafe, you probably will not put details like credit card numbers, bank accounts, social security numbers, and such information because you know some hacker can get that. I remember some universities requiring financial aid information that to be sent by email together with social security numbers. Several of those universities heard an earful from me on that. Typically, accountants will pass tax returns in emails and will attach zip files with some password. Guess what the password would be? Yep, accounts will use the social security number, or maybe even 4 digits of the social security number, something that a hacker can beat in nanoseconds. Given that many things should not be in open email, again we go back to the encryption problem. Should we have encrypted the communications with universities, for example? And this is the problem with the email standard. It is ubiquitous. Everyone has it. Everyone can receive email. But only an extremely small fraction of people will have the wherewithal to handle GPG, so you cannot expect this in real life. Instead of worrying about encrypting your email, understand the limitations of email and parlay that into moves that translate into safer communications. One of the best uses of email is for anonymity. This requires the ability to create new email accounts as needed for short-term or casual use. Tied to this is a stealth use. This is where hide in plain sight is actually acceptable. Normally, I wouldn't ever suggest that, but with email, it really needs to be part of the anonymity. One example of an anonymous use of emails is for logins to social media. Why use your real normal email on platforms that track you? Instead, use some throwaway email that none of your friends or contacts know about. This caveat is important because the header will not reveal a metadata trail of contacts in a relationship map that can be analyzed if the email address is not known to other contacts. If an email has not been used with contacts, then it will be free from information that can be used for tracking purposes. This particular need to create temporary and unimportant email accounts is satisfied precisely by the providers of free emails like Google Gmail, Yahoo, and Microsoft Outlook. You should not use emails that are tied to devices, for example, the Google ID or Apple ID. Apple, for example, gives you free email accounts, but it is tied to your Apple ID, so that is not something you want to use because it has baggage, a tracking baggage. When something is important, then what you should use is a paid email account. The paid email accounts are not collecting your data since they make their money from the traditional subscription method. Small companies, of course, have less likelihood of collecting your email data for any purpose, since that capability makes monetary sense only if millions of account data can be collected. Because of this kind of demand, I began offering this kind of email service myself, and it's called Braxmail. It is made to handle more serious email you don't want big tech to constantly read and use to profile you. Braxmail also gives you 5 different domains to use, so one email account has 5 different aliases, so you can categorize your email based on what domain you used. One of the biggest dangers of email tracking that you want to resolve is the IP address tracking. Since all emails have an IP address of the sender on it, it is a simple matter to even link multiple emails to one user just by grouping emails by IP address. Big tech can do this as well. You think you're fooling Gmail by setting up 5 email accounts, yet you didn't think about the IP address header? So the answer is that you have to use a VPN whenever you're sending email. I would also use a VPN when receiving email due to the potential of an email attack that can reveal the IP address of your device as well. I realize most people don't do this. In fact, it is interesting that some people will think about encryption but not think about the risks of the IP address being revealed. By the way, one of the biggest benefits of my Braxmail email service is that the header is stripped of IP address information, so you don't have to worry about IP address tracking, which leads to location tracking. This means that if you're using a Braxmail service, you will not need to worry about the VPN use. The reality is that aside from social media apps, the main function of a VPN is for emails. So this is something that you really have to consider and put into practice. Your goal is not to have emails associated with metadata that can reveal relationship maps and contact lists. For this reason, it is important that the email you use and the phone number you use for two-factor authentication, or 2FA, is not one that your contacts know. You must have email addresses not known to your contacts that you use only for things like 2FA and app login. If you follow this tip, then if an evil platform like WhatsApp tries to profile you by finding your Facebook account, it would fail since they can't find a matching email both in contacts of your friends nor in another Facebook account. So think about how you group your multiple emails. Some need to be reserved for 2FA and app login use. It should be automatically apparent as well that such email addresses should not have your real name. Since you are well versed now in the dangers of email and know the limitations of email, and know that someone is likely reading your emails, then you must have a strategy for moving important conversations away from email. And think clearly. Such an important conversation should not be moved to texting or SMS. Remember that government can see every text, so you don't want that. If someone is contacting you by email and you wish to have more private conversations, move the discussion to an encrypted platform or to a platform that has no identity. My preferred platform that both has no identity and is encrypted are apps that use the XMPP protocol. On Android, the best app for this is Conversations, and on iOS, there is Monal. On a PC, the app is Gajim. Set up your important contacts to choose to be on a different platform. I offer a free XMPP service to those who want to use this. It is xmpp.brax.live. So if you use one of those apps, you can use my service for free to handle the communications at the server side. You can use other apps like Signal, Telegram, and Session as well. I prefer not to use Signal and Telegram with people I don't know because they know your phone number. Session is better for that. I also have the BraxMe platform, which requires no identity of any user, so users talking privately on it would be completely under the radar and no identifiers are needed like phone numbers or emails. It's free, so you are all welcome to use it for communications. It's just a service I provide, just like the XMPP server. No benefit to me. In summary, I hope I made you smarter now. There's no need to use an encrypted email service, which of course are paid services, unless you are going to use it only one time and for one instance, and you don't have any payment records. For long-term use, encrypted emails offer no benefits. You're just waving a flag at everyone that you should be targeted. And no real benefit since 99% of your communications will be unencrypted and will profile you all within that one email account. Use multiple emails. Categorize them according to use. Leave your friends and family on one email address and don't mix it up. And accept the fact that there may be someone reading it. No way around that. Thank you for watching. See you next time.